I think that is our cue to kick off the next session. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Sarah Thompson, and I lead the Sustainable Finance Group for RBC Capital Markets. It is my great pleasure to be joined here on stage by Damien Steel, CEO of Deep Sky. Damien, I would say that RBC has been following Deep Sky's progress over the course of give or take the last 18 months from when we were first introduced. We had Deep Sky's co-founder, Fred Lalonde, speak at our Carbon Markets conference last November, and it was nice to catch up with you in New York at Climate Week last week. So I'm really looking forward to spending the next 30 minutes or so sort of diving into your tenure with Deep Sky, about 12 months in, I think, and talking a little bit about direct air capture technology in the market and some of the things needed to help scale and grow this space. So with that, Damien, perhaps you can start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself. You had a career in venture capital, including 13 years with OMERS Ventures. How did you find yourself at Deep Sky 12 months ago?
Yeah, 12 months going on 12 years, it feels like sometimes. So my background is actually important because it'll give you the perspective I have in most of the conversation we'll have. So I was an operator turned venture capitalist. I've spent the last 15 plus years as a VC backing early stage tech companies. And so I like to tell everybody I'm not a climate expert, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist. I'm somebody who's surrounded myself with new technologies, new innovations my whole life. I've seen lots of industries start and fail. I've seen lots of industries start and succeed. And the connection point here is I actually, the founder of Deep Sky is a guy by the name of Fred Lalonde, who is also the founder CEO of one of Canada's most successful private tech companies, Hopper. And Hopper's in the travel space. And so I made an early investment in Hopper in 2012. It's by far the best investment I've ever made in my career as a VC. I sat on the board for 8 years. And at Hopper, we had a program called Hopper Trees, where for every airline ticket we sold, we planted 2 trees. Very simple. That program started Fred, the founder, down this rabbit hole of unpacking climate and the problem. And like many of us who spend any time looking into it, he came out the other end completely terrified, said, I have to do something about this. So he started Deep Sky. He then went around to the shareholders of Hopper, and we all kind of pitched in, made a small investment, almost blind. When somebody makes you money, you keep giving them money. That's the secret of venture. If anybody wants to get into it, it's actually pretty simple. And so after making that seed investment, he cornered me in my office one day and said, hey, I want you to come and lead this company. I very quickly said, you're effing crazy. And that started a 3-week conversation, which ended with me leaving a career I thought I was going to retire in and joining a crazy startup. And it's been an absolute whirlwind for the last 12 months. I've loved every minute of it. Half the time, I have no idea what I'm doing. But it's exciting. I think it's important. And to jump to the punchline, when people ask, why did you do that? It's very simple. It's the single greatest opportunity I've ever seen in 20 years doing venture.
Great. Okay, so we'll unpack that a little bit. But maybe first, I think generally, carbon removals and engineered carbon removals and direct air capture specifically has seen a surge in interest and investment over the last several years, and a number of companies entering this space. What makes Deep Sky different?
Yeah, so Deep Sky is an IP-agnostic project developer. So what I mean by that is we don't make our own technology. That's super important because as far as I can tell today, we're the only IP-agnostic project developer looking to do carbon removals in the world. I hope that there's many, many others sometime soon. And the example I give to people is, there's a reason that renewable developers don't manufacture their own windmills or manufacture their own solar panels. I believe strongly that there's a difference between the creator of IP and technology and the builder of projects. I'm learning that the hard way right now. I'm learning firsthand how incredibly difficult it is to launch these projects. And so we are starting a company where we raised a bunch of money, raised about $75 million in a Series A, and we're using that to go around the world. We've met every single direct air capture company that exists. Direct air capture, just because we're in Alberta, is very different than CCS. CCS, put a cap on a chimney, you suck out the CO2 before it goes in the air. What I'm talking about is you put these pieces of equipment with big fans on it in the open field. We suck in the air, this air right here in this room. We use different technologies to remove the CO2, and then we store it 3 kilometers underground. The underground part we know how to do really well. Oil and gas industry has been doing this since the 70s. The difference is they do it to pump out more gas. We're doing it and leaving it there and storing it. The removal part, that technology is relatively new. Relatively, I say, because there's actually about 4 companies that have been around for over 10 years. And this is very common in tech world. You've got a couple companies that start, they do all the hard work. Some time goes by, and then there's a flood of new companies that hit the market. That's where we are today. So there's over 100 direct air capture technology companies that exist today in the world. There's probably a new one that gets created every month or even couple weeks. And all of these range in terms of the type of tech they use to do that thing of removing CO2 from the air, but they all do the same thing. And we're looking to build commercial grade facilities, which I define that as removing 1 million tons a year of CO2 using these technologies.
So maybe on that point, talk a little bit about the role that DAC will play in helping us achieve net zero emissions, maybe in the context of other solutions and technologies out there.
So just to get it out of the way, I think we need all solutions, okay? So while Deep Sky is very, very focused on carbon removals, I think we need to invest in everything. Like we are long, long past the point of picking and choosing what technology we invest in. So, but I've got to focus on something, so we're focusing on the really, really hard stuff, mechanical carbon removals. And so I think when you look at our goals as a society to decarbonize, the IPCC has us being net zero by 2050. In order to achieve that by 2050, the estimate is that we need to be removing, not capturing, removing 10 gigatons of CO2 a year. That's 10 billion tons of CO2 a year. Why? Because there's certain things that we do that we just can't decarbonize unless none of you plan on flying ever again. And trust me, there's not enough corn in the world to make enough SAF fuel. Although again, SAF fuel is great, we should be doing it, but there's limits to each of these technologies as you look down the chain. For me, as I think about like true ultra scale, mechanical, which means we just build it, is the one solution that is absolutely scalable. It also happens to be the most expensive solution, no surprise, but we're in the early days and we think we can bring that down. But that's the goal. 2050, we need to be removing 10 gigatons a year. And just to like really level set here, because it is overwhelming, what we're talking about in that is one commercial facility, which has yet to be built on this planet, at full scale would be about 1 million tons a year. And we need to be removing 10 billion. Right. So that's one of those facilities a day needs to be built between now and 2050. That's the goal.
So scalability is key. And that is, as you say, one of the benefits of direct air capture, including, I would say, other benefits like relatively low land use requirements, to some extent site flexibility. I mean, you've got storage considerations to take into account, but there are pipelines and so on. So maybe we'll come back to that. I would say one of the challenges, though, that I'd like to talk about with you is the energy intensity of direct air capture. And that's because a lot of energy is required to separate carbon from air. And how, therefore, do you think about that in the context of a net zero emissions goal and being sort of net emissions efficient with these plants?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer, but you bring up a good point, which is this is not a technology problem. I say to the line I use with my team at Deep Sky is all roads lead to power. What I mean by that is, trust me, if I can understand the technology, it's not rocket science. I also happen to have this immense faith that smart engineers can pretty much build anything if they put their minds to it. I've just had it proved to me over the last 20 years of my career, so I believe that as human beings, we put our mind to building tech, we can do it, we can build the impossible, we can do it way cheaper than anybody ever thinks. What I'm concerned about is we need renewable power to power these sites. There's no world where we can use natural gas and capture the CO2 from natural gas and then create a removal site. Like think of the immense extra stuff you got to do that. So we need more renewable power. That's the bad news because as our previous speaker was rightly pointing out, is we don't have enough. Like, we don't have enough power today for the electrification of society, never mind what the amount of data centers we want to build just to do what AI can do today, never mind what we want it to do tomorrow, and then you go down the list. And so that's the problem. The good news is, in Canada, I actually think we are a leader in renewable. You know, we have a couple hydro grids already. We've got room to build much more renewable. Alberta's a leader in that. And then the last thing, which is early days, and so this is a hypothesis we're working on, but the nice thing with direct air capture is it's variable. What I mean by that is it doesn't need to be on all the time, 24/7. And there's actually certain technologies where there's different pieces of the technology that can run at different times in order for the whole system to be going 24/7. And so the reason that's important is if you think about what we're doing to our grids, you take a hydro grid as an example, like Manitoba, Quebec, or British Columbia. Quebec is a great example. Quebec is publicly stated they're building one of the largest wind power sites in Canada. I believe they're trying to add 30% capacity to their grid, which sounds great. But you know, you're loading up the grid with a bunch of variable supply, and you've got variable demand. And so what are you essentially doing is you're actually increasing the delta between absolute peak availability and base load demand, which I'm no power expert, but I'm told is a problem. An example of that problem surfacing in Australia, Southern Australia, they actually pay people to take electricity for 25% of the day. Why? Because it's easier to pay somebody than to curtail it. And so I hope the theory here that we're trying to work on with some of the utilities is there a way that we can build DAC facilities to actually help balance the grid? So can I come into an environment and say, you know what, I don't care about the available capacity, I'm not going to touch any of it, because capacity means peak. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and gobble up all the excess electrons that you could be producing throughout the day, but that you're not using or you're curtailing in whatever way. And is there a way that we can turn DAC as an arbitrage on excess electrons, turn them into carbon credits? So, you know, generate revenue through carbon credits, decarbonize our environment, and help the grid would be the trifecta. That's hypothesis today. Okay. Yeah, just to be clear.
So, so you've just broken ground on the construction of your research facility, Deep Sky Labs here in Alberta. So just maybe building on some of your comments about the renewable energy sort of landscape in Canada and the opportunities or challenges in Alberta for that matter. You know, why did you choose Alberta for this first project? And what do you see, you know, as a path for development in the province?
Yeah, so just to be clear, we want to build, or like my own personal goal and ambition is to build 100 commercial facilities across Canada before I'm done, and I don't want to work forever. I like to golf too much. So we're starting with a test facility. It's a small, relatively small facility, 6 acres of land up in Innisfail. And what we've done in that facility is we've gone around the world, met every DAC company. We picked the best 8, and we bought a prototype. So we paid them. They're being manufactured. They're European, US, there's a Canadian company, and they're in the process of being shipped to Canada. We are building a site in Innisfail, which will be the world's first carbon removal innovation center. And so we're going to set these 8 units up side by side. Nobody's ever picked different tech because everybody's focused on one. We're going to put them side by side, and we're going to test them. And we're going to learn. We're going to share the data with those partners. And we've got access to renewable power. We've got access to storage. We will produce carbon credits. The number is not significant. And we're going to see how these things operate. We need to test how do they work in the cold. So most of these technologies don't love the cold, which we have an abundance of in Canada. See how they work in the summer. And ultimately, we want to use this facility to take the best of technologies out of that facility and expand them into commercial sites. Why Alberta? One, there's a financial reason. So in Canada, we have the CCUS ITC, which stands for Investment Tax Credit. That's a federal program that exists, which essentially gives a 60% rebate on all CapEx related to carbon removal. So that is absolutely critical for first-of-a-kind projects like ours. Unfortunately, to access that ITC, you have to build within a province with approved subsurface regulations. So the feds have said, look, province, you need to make sure that they don't cause any kind of crazy stuff by putting CO2 underground. There's 3 provinces in Canada that have those regulations. It's British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan. So that kind of sent us west. The other thing Alberta has is some of the best storage on the planet. We have identified storage capacity underground in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba that's big enough to basically store every ton of CO2 humanity's ever put up in the air. Like, let that sink in for a second. And so the subsurface exists here. And then we actually found a renewable project where we're buying over half of the capacity through a virtual PPA. So the stars aligned. The last thing is the talent. 9 out of every 10 engineers I interview happen to be from the energy sector, no surprise. And so not only is this great for Alberta, but maybe I'll just parlay this into a larger comment, which is, and we don't have time to talk about all the science because it would be a big rabbit hole, but if you believe the science of climate change, you don't even have to believe all of it, right? You can just believe part of it, which, by the way, I do now. After 12 months of studying the data, it's terrifying. If you believe the science and you believe what we need to do in order for our children to live a life that all resembles the one we have the luxury of living, we need to build a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And I say that broadly, not just carbon removals, but the whole sector. And we need to build an industry that's multiple times the size of the oil and gas industry. And we need to do it really, really fast, faster than I think we realize. Canada has all the elements to be a global leader in that industry. And not only does that make me proud, it makes me excited, it kind of gives me energy, but we have the renewable power today. We have room to build much, much more renewable power because 90% of our population lives within 100 miles of the US border. We have some of the best storage on the planet, and we have all the talent, which is out here. So we really have no excuse. And the line, my head of comms hates me using this line, but I'll use it anyways. What Saudi is to the oil and gas industry, Canada could be for the carbon removal industry. And Alberta is the epicenter of that.
Okay, compelling. I want to talk about demand, but before I go there, you talked about renewable energy capacity, you talked about storage, you talked about talent. How did the community of Innisfil receive you, or what kind of community engagement was part of your process, I suppose? For
9 out of 10 people received us incredibly well.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay.
I'm just joking. I'm totally joking.
Are there concerns about the storage, leakage, et cetera?
Community engagement is a part of our business that, frankly, I'm learning very quickly, and it's super important. There are so many really good questions about what we're doing. I get it. Big machines sucking in air, putting CO2 in tanks, it's scary. And so in Innisfil specifically, we went out of our way to make sure we educated first and foremost. We held sessions across town. I gave a session at the local Rotary Club of Innisfil. 50 amazing individuals showed up, and I mean, I can say this because I grew up in Toronto, but I went home to my wife. I live in Toronto, and I said, man, like if Torontonians were as nice as they are in Innisfil, life would be so much easier. So we do a lot of community engagement. We held 2 open houses, and the important part to appreciate for a project developer, and if there's any project developers in here, you're probably, yeah, no kidding. Community engagement is not a one-time thing. So there's a long plan of working closely with the community, helping not only educate, but first hire local people in the community. And the thing that excites me about carbon removal and this potential enormous industry is this, albeit small, test and innovation facility could be a breeding ground for new talent in what clearly, my biased view is that it could be an enormous opportunity. So.
Cool. Okay, let's get back to demand. So we talked about some of the benefits, we talked about some of the challenges around energy consumption. I would say that the energy intensity of DAC is maybe one of the things that makes these credits more expensive. And I don't know what the current numbers are on sort of cost per ton of CO2 captured. You will know better, but we're talking hundreds of dollars, more than hundreds of dollars, $1,000, okay? So how do we scale? How do we bring those costs down, and how do we expand demand for consumption of these credits beyond some of the early tech buyers, the Microsofts, the Shopifys, and so on of the world? How do we involve the broader sort of economy in the carbon markets?
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate question. So just to answer the first part, it's really expensive today. But I get this question all the time, like, what's it cost? And why it's too expensive. And I just say, look, like, we have proven as a society that we are really, really good at driving down cost of technology. Solar's a perfect example. If you look at any forecast, if you go back in time and look at any forecast of the future cost down of solar, we beat everyone. Same thing with the cost of memory. I was joking in the car on the way here, because I'm preparing for another presentation, where I was joking about remembering when I was in high school at Business Depot and selling a 100 meg hard drive. And the presentation I was working on was 2 gigs. So we lose track of how good we are at doing this stuff. Today, the true cost of removing a ton of CO2 using DAC is over $1,000 a ton, which is crazy. But do I think we can get it down to a range of, I'll go really wide, 200 to 400? Absolutely. The new equipment is 100% electrical. For those of you energy buffs in here, we think that we could get it down to about 1,000 kilowatts an hour per ton of CO2 removed. That's the magical number we're working towards. But like all things, we will get the cost down. I'm not concerned about that. On the market side, there is no market today. I mean, to call it a market would be a gross exaggeration. There's what we call a voluntary market, which has some really leading companies like RBC, like the tech companies, who are taking a very forward-looking view. It's frankly partly philanthropic to help launch an industry. And then you have a bunch of government support. And without that government support, like, these things would not get off the ground. By the way, that happens for most large infrastructures. If you go back in time and look at their first of a kinds, you just have to have that kind of support. So that's where we are today. I have a strong belief this market needs to be regulated in some way. And what I mean by regulated, I don't mean like taxing individuals. I mean is like, we need something we can trade. Like, we need a commodity or a security that's a carbon credit. Otherwise, I just don't think you have true liquidity in a market. The good news is the commodities regulators in the US have been working on this for the last year. Nothing moves fast, but they're moving on it. I think if they come out, I think Canada probably copies that. But you are seeing a market come together slowly, but I refer to it today as the Wild West.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that makes it difficult for buyers like RBC to dip their toes in.
Here's a great example. This labs project, we're working on a bunch of customers on a 10-year offtake on a very small number of tons. At the beginning, we're not there now, we're dealing with much fewer customers, but at the beginning we had 8 genuinely interested customers. All 8 wanted it to be on their own purchase agreement. These are like 90 to 100-page agreements. Name me another industry where that happens. Like, it was crazy. And so it's just a little silly example of how immature the market is. And we as an industry need to keep plowing forward and getting it to a scalable position, which we are far from today.
So maybe pivoting a little bit and just keeping my eye on the time here, Damien, I want to ask, how do you go about building a team that is dedicated to delivering these projects? What's the mix? Who are you looking for? Who have you seen join? Talk to us a little bit about the sort of HR component. Yeah, so we're extremely unique as a company, and I can't even tell you this is going to work yet because that would be too bold. But I can tell you my foundational beliefs on this stuff. So I believe that in order for this to succeed, we need to release ourselves of the shackles of how things have been done in the past. Okay? So I think any great company, like you look at, why is Elon Musk, you may disagree with his values, but the guy can build technology. Why is he able to take a rocket ship that NASA had built for 20 years at the same cost and do it for 10% of the cost? Why? Because he tries things differently. He tests the norm. He questions and questions. He goes down to first principles. In order to have a company that is based on first principles, you need something that I refer to as smart creatives. Smart creative is somebody who questions everything. It can be a little overwhelming, have a company full of smart creatives, but that's what we're trying to do. So what that means is if you look under the covers at Deep Sky, what you won't see
and I'll say this because I am one, so I can say it, you won't see a bunch of old white guys who've been there and done that and built many, many natural gas facilities or whatever. And half of you in this room are probably thinking, wow, you're crazy because you're going to blow your face off when you start trying to do this. It's not to say we're not going to layer in experience, but the core of our company is going to be individuals. It just so happens that what I'm describing skews to a younger age. Like, I have no bias on age. I don't really care how old somebody is. But if I look at my existing team, they're relatively young. Most of them are younger than I am. But we are going to create a company of smart creatives, and we are going to test everything. We work with an EPC right now. I went through about 3 EPCs before I found one that would actually work with us, because the first 3 thought we were crazy. And that's okay. I was in a room full of entrepreneurs this morning. They're asking, well, how do you raise money? And so I said to them, stop trying to please the room. If what you really want to do is build a company of extreme significance, you have to be okay with 90% of the people thinking you're crazy. And so I don't try and please the room. I say, this is who we are. We're going to do things differently. We are going to make mistakes, right? The only thing I won't risk, the only thing, is safety, period. Everything else is on the table, because I'm working backwards from building 100 megaton facilities in Canada. I believe we need 10,000 of them globally. And so nothing in between matters. And the only way we're going to achieve that scale is to take risk, be creative, and find people who are just crazy enough to do that alongside me. Cool.
So maybe then picking up on this thread about we have to make mistakes, what have you learned so far? What is your advice maybe to others in this space? And what do we need to do generally, going back to scalability, to really grow this space? I've
learned, I'm not kidding when I said I'm 12 months going on 12 years. As an industry, and I say we, including ourselves, I think one thing that's become super clear to me is we can't do everything ourselves, meaning I meet a lot of carbon removal companies, and most of them still today say, we're going to do everything. And that's very common for early stage tech. What's become painfully clear to me is that this is a war that we need to fight as an ecosystem, not as one company. The challenge is too great. The opportunity is too great, frankly. And so it's being open to working with other industries, being open to working with other companies. I believe that sincerely. It's whether it's a lesson or not, I don't know. But that's kind of the number one takeaway that I have, that I try and share with whoever asks, because I think it's not something I see all the time, to be honest.
Right. And maybe just to close us out, Damien, what's one thing that you are most excited about in the next 12 months?
I'm excited about actually getting a commercial site off the ground. And longer than 12 months, I'm excited that we can actually solve this problem. I have a unhealthy level of optimism. It's really easy to get dark when you spend time in climate. It's really easy to get depressed, and it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole and have despair. I've spent a living backing people building the impossible. If you take a step back and you look at what human beings are able to do when their backs are truly against the wall, it is incredible. In this case, I think we just need to realize the wall's right behind us. And what excites me is the potential to actually put a dent in this problem, because I think we can do it. And as I said before, I think Canada can be a leader. And that, to me, just makes me very proud.
Great. Well, that is a very positive and optimistic note to end on. Congratulations on all that you and Deep Sky have accomplished over the last number of months. Congratulations on Deep Sky Labs in Innisfail, and we look forward to following your progress over the coming months. Thank you, Damien.
Thanks.